We've got time for question and answers, and I'm going to prioritize the jury that are sat on the front row as they have a difficult decision to make. James?
Thank you very much for all of your presentations, and I recognize that all of your remarkable projects sit in very different contexts. Can you describe the ground floor relationships and how they respond to their different context at grade? And I guess that would be for all of the...
Sure. I will say that in New York, what we were trying to do is that we did have, in a way, to build a full podium all the way to the perimeter of the street. And we also, in a way, incorporated a tower or a skyscraper, thus the court scraper. So by placing the courtyard one story above, we basically allowed ourselves to have that full podium. And one thing that was really important is that this is a residential building that is, in a way, a pioneering residential building, meaning that this area had been primarily industrial and was, for the first time now, bringing in families and people to the street. So you also had to create a street life. So the first businesses that are actually coming in are a restaurant that caters to families. There's kiosks and markets. There is a theater complex to also enliven and bring some cultural life into that part of town. So the way that it meets the street, I think, is that along the full perimeter, you will have shops, you will have places of business, and that open themselves up to the 709 units. So you're literally having about 1,500 people living there. There's also a drop-off or point of entry, and one of the things that the Durst organization asked us was not to have multiple points of entry into the residential. They wanted one point of entry. And so you come into the reception area, you have the stair that leads up to the courtyard, you can see it as you enter into the lobby, and then there are two cores of elevators that take you up to the hallways that take you to your units. So that's literally how the building meets the ground.
I think for the Shanghai Tower, it's a really insightful question, and three components of the response. The first is, of the three towers in the district, there's a large setback to create green space that rings the three buildings as part of the development. Green space for the public for all three buildings, and they work very well together. The second piece is with the again, the mixed-use, multi-use component. There's different entry points. Hotel entry is off to the west side. Office entry is off to the south side. Retail entry is on the north side opposite the retail across the street. And then the third piece is through the use of sunken gardens and raised terraces. There's a raised terrace off of the assembly space, the large meeting space. The sunken garden connects you to the subway and the underground system, and when you enter that open vertical garden, you're able to look up and see the tower, so it's an intuitive wayfinding for your entry point from the subway. So it's those three components of how the tower addresses the ground.
Jean?
Yeah, transition with the ground is a question of roots first. When you see the buildings it's also a lot of walls around. It's also steps. It's not exactly the same level on the ground. It's the beginning of the interior also. I think interior architecture is perhaps more important than outside architecture. In tall buildings also, because in tall buildings you have the tendency to repeat the same thing. So it has begun at the level of the ground, sure. Dakis, you want to say something?
Well, for the white walls, I think one important aspect of its relationship with the Zaha Hadid Square and the Venetian walls. So the dialogue between Zaha Hadid, the Venetian walls, and Jean Nouvel is extremely important, and that's what really makes it very special in that particular position. Thank you.
The Cube is a residential building, and the complete plot is also private. It is also in an area now where there is nothing, so it's even not a paved road at the moment. But then again, it's already take a step in the future. And what we did is that we have the landscape, the full ground floor is completely landscaped. So there's even not, by even cantilevering the complete building, as you can see also in the images and also in the drawings, there's no column whatever in the facade. It is the landscape and the entrance become one. Even the parking entrance is part of the landscape. And so we have on the front there's a very big garden with the trees, small trees, and then on the top and in the hill you have private gardens. So it's a more kind of free flow of stepped terraces, gardens, etc.
Maybe one more thing to add to that is that when we started the building process, this was actually an illegal garbage heap, our location. So, and this is the first building that was realized here. So it is actually the incentive to make this area. We really needed to make the spot here. That's why we not only designed the building, but actually the whole plot is designed and landscaped.
Any other questions from the jury? Hashima.
Hi. I'd like to congratulate all of you for remarkable buildings that you produced. A special question to Mr. Alexander Durst. Your building is iconic, it's remarkable, and as well as functional and sustainable. But as owner or developer, how much does this increase your property value given the proximity of the tower, the power tower and the sanitation center?
Well, it's a very hard thing to measure. It is a rental building, as I mentioned, and we are in the middle of leasing it up presently. And so the leasing is going very well, better than projected. How much you can attribute to the architecture itself is very difficult to say. So
I'll help you.
It's a very hard question to answer. We have a variety of marketing consultants, and they mentioned that it's the first time that they've seen, I should say one of the first times that they've seen residents indicate that the architecture has actually drawn them to the building. So to answer your question, it has affected. How much? Very hard to say.
Good answer. Carl?
They are wonderful buildings, each and every one of them, and congratulations. I think James's question about the buildings and how they interact with community and the ground plane was first and foremost in our minds, just how taller buildings do engage with community. But I've got one very small question, and it just intrigues me. It's for Jean. Your building is, at that scale, it's a very interesting blend of residential and, I suppose, boutique office. I wonder, were the offices designed for the people living in the building? And if not, how did you blend the two uses? Do they mix with each other, i.e. in the entry lobbies, etc.?
I explained this architecture is done to be uninhabit. And we inhabit with different functions automatically. We inhabit when we are inside, and we stay inside when we live inside. And the condition to inhabit is a condition of the architecture. And here, of course, to work in this space, but also to live in this space, but also to have art in this space, that was the basis of a lot of variations. And I think we cannot reinvent everything every time. That was one of the main questions of the modernity of the 20th century. When you are in a special climate, in a special culture, it's always a question of invention and reinterpretation. And this reinterpretation is a condition to breathe, to feel, to see the external light, to feel the material, to touch the material, the detail of the transition of a window, what you see through, the framings, all of that. That is architecture. And it's a common point if you have an office or if you have an apartment. Function is important, but very often you change the function in existing architecture. And very often it's interesting, because you have not only the basis of the function and the real dimension limited, something is open. And here we have to create architecture to answer to the function, of course, but to give more than the function, to give something more linked, more to the feeling of the pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you. Unless, Michael, no questions?
I got one question.
Okay, you got the final question,
all right.
Michael.
I'm curious, first of all, how do you talk your client into 1,200 different mega panels? Is it, I mean, I need that argument, like.
Yeah, it's also a testament to, in this case, Thornton Tomasetti and Enclose, and patience on behalf of the client. It did, in many ways, stress the construction timeline, but I think everyone is kind of overly committed in a project like this, so that the contractors, the subcontractors who are on the job, work overtime to figure things out. Everyone is, in a way, invested. And
let me just,
absolutely. They didn't necessarily talk us into 1,200 panels. They came up with a stunningly brilliant design. And as Kai mentioned, it is the engineers that figured out how to make it work.
Yeah, and it was worth it. Incredible.
Absolutely.
I wanted to, if I could just ask Mr. Nouvel, the quality of light in the architecture that you've created is stunning. And it comes from different scales of windows, of different orientation. Did you give any latitude to the local craftsmen as they were building that facade with those hundreds of small apertures? Or was all of it designed and dimensioned so that the craftsmen followed your blueprint?
Yes, but the quality of light is the main question generally in architecture. It's the main question linked to the situation, to the climate. And when you have a very sunny climate, very hot, you have to create a lot, generally, of impact of light. The geometry create a geometry of light impacted the interior, the floors, the walls. It's not only one hole, one big hole. You cannot do that. It's a repartition of the light. You have that in Arabian architecture also. you print the light on the walls and on the and on the ceiling, on the floors. Sorry, sometimes in the ceiling by reflection, but on the floors. And I think is the best way to answer to these questions. You can do that even in library. For example, library of our institute is done like this, and you can read the books perfectly. But it's a repartition of light, and every time it's a little variation always. It's never the same with the seasons, with the days, the hours of the days. You feel the variation of light with the system.